Okay, let's give this a shot. I feel like I'm talking to someone. Hi, I should turn that around. I can at least see it. Off or not. That one? Yay, it will. Okay, in a nutshell, my name is Frances Scott. I was most likely born without very well-developed hip sockets. It's called congenital hip dysplasia. I was a runner and really active as a kid and all my life, so basically my alignment was wrong with my hips, and then I put a lot of miles on them. So by the age of 28, I was hurting all the time in my hips, and they couldn't really figure out what was wrong for about a decade. And then when I was 39, they said, we know what's wrong. You've been wearing out your hips, you're bone on bone, and the only thing we can do to help you is replace. And they said the only thing we can do to help you is replace both hips. So I had a scope surgery first, and that didn't work to alleviate the pain. So I went back and had a total hip replacement done in September. So I went back and had a total hip replacement done in September of 2011. I didn't get better. The pain, of course, was there right after surgery, and it just didn't get better. And at one point, I went in to see the physical therapist, and she said, how have you been? I said, I had a bad weekend, and I had to take some of the prescription drugs that they gave me after surgery. And she said, oh, you shouldn't still be needing those. And so that was the first indicator that something was wrong. I knew I did need them. And so I immediately quit all the drugs, but the pain was incredibly severe, and it lasted for the next 4 years. At some point I heard that my hips were no longer on the market anymore. It's known as a silent recall. Basically, the FDA said, okay, maker of metal on metal hips, we know you didn't do pre-market studies. We're going to require you to do post-market studies and then submit the results to us. At that point, the company that made my hips said, we're just not going to sell them anymore. So makes the FDA happy because the hips aren't getting sold anymore, but the company doesn't have to admit anything's wrong with the hips that they've now put in so many people. So I had bilateral or double hip replacement when I was 39 years old. I was a runner, a dancer, the most active person I knew, and by 28 I was hurting all the time. By 39, the doctor said the only thing we can do to help you is replace both hips. I had heard about problems, metal ions developing in the blood or being found in the blood of people who had double hip replacement. And I actually talked to my doctor about it on the morning of, before surgery. I talked to my doctor about it before the surgery and actually on the morning of surgery. I said, I'm worried about the metal ions. And he said, well, yeah, you'll have higher metal ions than somebody who doesn't have a hip replacement, but it just doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any effect on the body. It's just you'll have elevated ions. They don't cause any problems. So I trusted him, and in the end I said, just give me what you would give your wife. And when I came out of surgery, I said, now why did I need this again? And he said, we think you were born without sockets. And so you had bad alignment, and then you put high miles on your hips with all the running and activity you did. and you have hypermobility too. So that's probably part of what's causing your pain. So after I didn't get better in a normal time frame from the double hip replacement, my surgeon sent me on to the head of his physical therapy. I went to months and months of physical therapy. Normally people are feeling great in a couple weeks, but it was months and months later. I couldn't stand. I couldn't walk without extreme pain. So my husband basically said, just sit down. If you hurt, just sit down. Leave the dishes, leave the kids. They can walk over and get themselves a pickle out of the fridge. Just sit there. So that's what I did. And I went to physical therapy. That's about the only thing I did with my days for 7-8 months. And at first the physical therapist said, we think you're hypermobile, so you're too flexible, so stop stretching and just strengthen, and that will help. And he watched me for a couple of months and basically said, okay, you're released, and I still hurt. So then I went back to my surgeon. He sent me to a partner who deals with troublesome cases like mine. The doctor said, we think you have central sensitization, which basically means you were in pain for so long, unmedicated, undiagnosed, that your body, your central nervous system, learned that pain is normal. And so she said, we have to put you back on the narcotics together with an SNRI, a type of antidepressant. And I said, but I'm not depressed, I'm just hurting. And she said, we don't know why it works, but it does, so you have to take it. And she said, if we don't get you out of pain in this next 6 months, your brain will be even more convinced that pain is normal and you will hurt forever. So I did that, and again, nothing helped. I didn't get out of pain. I couldn't function for about 4.5 years. So the physical therapist said, the hips are good, you're far enough along now, you shouldn't be needing painkillers. And then I'd go in to see the doctor, and I wasn't feeling great. And I shared that with him, and he said, the x-ray's good, the pinnacle's good, I don't really know what your problem is. So I went to various, let's see, what happened next? Then the pinnacle was taken off the market with that silent recall, is what it's known in the industry. And my doctor passed me along to a third doctor. My surgeon passed me along to a third doctor, his physician's assistant. And I kept going back to her, and finally she said, I don't know why you keep making appointments. I can't do anything for you. So right about that time, I learned about the cobalt and chromium poisoning that other people were having. And I called my surgeon and I said, I'm reading that we should be tested for this. Could you please test me for cobalt and chromium? And so he ordered the test and never called to tell me what it was. I had to actually walk with my kids, which was extremely painful, go to the lab and pick up the test results. And that's how I found out that my cobalt and chromium were a level such that if I was being poisoned at my workplace, that OSHA would have shut down the workplace at that point. But because the damage was coming from inside my body, it's different, according to the industry. So I knew my levels were high. Of course, other people had much higher levels, so nobody seemed really concerned. I went to other doctors, other surgeons, once my surgeon kind of was done with me. And I went to other surgeons, and they said, oh wow, when the first hip went bad, the first metal hip, the ASR started to be so problematic, we just stopped using all metal hips. And I thought, I wish my doctor had done that. So I sought the advice of lots of other surgeons in 2 different states over the next 4 years, and basically was told, your hip, the pinnacle is a great hip. The x-rays look good. It's still in place. We don't know what's wrong with you. I read enough about metal hips, and I started to say, well, maybe I should just get them taken out, because what if my body doesn't like the metal? At that point it had clicked, I could never wear cheap earrings, and so my grandmother had a nickel allergy, and I suspected I did too. There's nickel in the hips. My grandmother had a nickel allergy so bad that she almost died from it, just from the nickel irritating and then infecting her ear. So, let's see. So I went and said, maybe I should get revisions. Maybe I should get these hips taken out. And the doctor I was seeing said, you'd be crazy. People get these taken out and that doesn't help the pain. And the Pinnacle is a great device. Like, the Pinnacle on its worst day is so much better than the ASR on its best day. Come to find out, the Pinnacle got to market based on a predicate device that had never been tested on humans because of 510K. And the ASR got to market based on the Pinnacle as its predicate device. So they were so much alike that the problematic ASR got to market based on the fact that the company said it's so much like the Pinnacle that we don't need to do human clinical trials. But yet when the ASR went bad, they said, oh, the Pinnacle's nothing like the ASR. Well, which is it? So I went to a surgeon, and I went to a surgeon here in another state, and he assured me that the Pinnacles were awesome, that they had no problems like the ASR had had. Fast forward several months later, and I find out, because of one of the first bellwether cases to go to trial, I found out that the company was trying to use that surgeon, my surgeon, as a expert to testify against his own patient. And the